So, hi everyone, good afternoon. Welcome to the sleepy session after lunch. Luckily, we're not doing anything as dull as hearing about a really cool project. We're going to talk about strategy because that is the most exciting thing. And that is the thing you all wanted to do at this point when the carbs are working through and you thought actually the blood might focus elsewhere than the brain at this point in time. So I'm Chief Executive at the Ogden Trust. We're a family charity. We support the teaching and learning of physics in England. Sorry to those from further flung regions. We have done outreach support in Wales and Scotland, but for schools, we are England only, which gets very tricky across the borders of that and how that works. So we've been working with universities. It's about 2005. It's always very hard to pin down when you start these things, isn't it, in the history thing. But we count from about 2005, working with universities to support them to do their outreach and to do it in a strategic way. And for the vast period of that, that has been about investing in the people and the staff to be able to do that and to coordinate it. So we started off with funding a program to support outreach officer positions in physics departments. And I'm delighted to see so many of you here and on Zoom here today as well. We have now finished that before anybody gets their hopes up. Our last entrance in the funding round was 2019, and now we have nobody left on our funding program. And so we've been through a transition period over the last few years of how we approach it, and it's still really about the people and the people who are doing it and how we can provide them the support and what they need to be able to go out and do it the best they can and what that looks like. It can be quite tricky sometimes. You can feel quite on your own in what that looks like. And so really great to have these opportunities where we can bring people together to share what you're doing, hear from other people, get some new ideas, hear that you're not on your own, that everybody's in the same boat. The problems you're having in your university or organization might be slightly different, but broadly similar to some of the problems that are being seen elsewhere. You don't want it to descend into a bitch fest, but it's just nice to know that you're all in the same place a little bit sometimes in how that goes. So just to start off with, and to make sure nobody's immediately gone to sleep, why are we doing this? Why do you do it? I just want you to take a few minutes. I'm not giving you a set number. I'll decide when it's up. To speak to the person next to you or in a small group. Why do you do it personally? I presume you do if you've come to a Communicators conference. Why have you chosen to do it? If you're on Zoom, if you can put it in the chat, so that Jen doesn't have to operate tiny breakout rooms on short notice, then that would be great. So just take a few minutes. Why do outreach or engagement work? So we've got an answer here.
During fascination.
Excellent. James, you were very keen. Do you want to round us off?
Weird stuff, and it's a.
I feel like we should set some parameters on weird, just for safeguarding purposes on that. But that's great, right? Everybody's got different reasons. You're all coming to it with your own personal perspective of what you want to do. And at the end, the heart of that is what drives your passion and what you want to do. And kind of as Trent was saying this morning, the importance of that authentic understanding of why you're doing it. Why do you care? Why is this something you want to be out there doing? And that will give you that passion and authenticity to be able to do it. How many of you, by a show of hands, think your reason chimes with your institution's reason? There's a couple. You don't count Trents for that one. You run your institution, you're not allowed to sign up on that. And so I think one of the key pieces for me around taking a strategic approach is the art of compromise. If you take what your personal values are and what you want to do and what your institution cares about, wants to do, be it recruitment, looking good, having nice press stories, pictures of happy children, reputation laundering, whatever it is, what you are looking for in your strategy, department-wide, and for that kind of piece with how you make the case, is the overlap part in that Venn diagram between what you care about. Because what you don't want to do is do something you don't care about. The university says, we are now on a civic university agenda, and so we have decided we are going to do these 3 things. And so you go, oh, right. Mm-hmm. That's not going to bring you the joy and the passion in what you do that's so important to making it a great experience for everyone. You need to enjoy it. You need to be valuing it. Equally, if you go off and do the weirdest, wackiest thing that you care about, that's really important to you, and no one else in your institution does, it's not a bad thing. You're not going to get funding, and nobody else is going to support you to do it and come with you. And so there's no harm in doing that. And if you've got other routes, you've got the time, and that's what you want to do, by all means. But if you want to think about growth and you want to think about bringing other people with you, then it's thinking about that a little bit more strategically. So not all of you will be in the position to create strategies for your department or for your university or for your institution. It might be about creating a strategy for you. You've got limited time. Time is valuable. We're all short of it. You've got limited money, possibly none, possibly spending your own money on this, suboptimal. And so how do you spend that resource to be the most valuable to what you're going to do? I should caveat before I really get into this, two things. One, I'm saying outreach a lot. There's lots of words. I don't tend to use science communication much. I do use engagement, but outreach and engagement every time just starts to take forever. So civic universities is newer. I haven't updated any of my slides. So there's lots of bits that this could be called and framed. I am using outreach throughout as a shortcut to mean, broadly speaking, all of those things. And strategically, it doesn't really make a difference. Strategically, you could take a lot of this and apply it to something that's probably not outreach and engagement at all. And the principles kind of hold the same. So that's number one. Number two is this is not a session about giving the answers to how you do a strategy. This is a session that will leave you with almost exactly 0 answers, but lots of questions. And those questions are for you to take away. And I think it's one of the things we do see quite a bit from some of the universities. They're like, oh, could you just give us a template and then we'll just fill it out with our bits? It's like, well, no, because that's not how a strategy works. And that's not what's important. The document, you know, it's good to have it written down because then people can refer back to it. But actually, it's the process of going through it. That's the most important bit, that you will get the value out of that, finding that piece of shared understanding about what you're doing, why you're doing it, who's doing it, and what you're hoping to happen. So, as I say, it may be that this is just for you personally. You might be in a situation where you are broadly working in isolation and it's about what you want to get out of it. But even so, and I'm not saying if you're doing it on your own, you should have a nice written strategy that you put through design and do a nice binding on. But it's still worth having these conversations with yourself, out loud if you like, up to you, about what you're trying to achieve. If you are in a bigger organization, it might be about trying to get that together and get a shared understanding. Because if you come together, you'll get more value. If you find other people with those shared values and a shared sense of purpose, you can achieve more together than you will be able to on your own. So the first thing, and we were kind of just drawing on it there, what is the purpose of your outreach activities? What are you trying to do it for? And it might not just be one thing, because you might enjoy it, but actually, what's the purpose for the audience? What's the purpose for the different people involved? Is it just you? Are you taking your PhD students with you? What's the purpose of that for them? What's the purpose for the audience you're working with in terms of what you're doing? And what do you hope to achieve? What would success look like? How do you come away going, yeah, actually, that went pretty well. Quite chuffed with that. Versus the ones where you stagger, I go, oh, Jesus, never doing that again. That was an absolute disaster. Please get these children away from me. I don't want to see them ever again. There's only a couple of classes like that. They're usually on a Friday afternoon. Avoid Friday afternoons in school. Not a great time overall. What types of activity are you doing? So I'll be talking a lot about schools. That's my background, has mostly been in the schools outreach side of it. So I started out at University of Surrey as part of the Southeast Network collaboration. And I was the outreach officer there, where I met Andrew, and we did some work with the NPL. And others across the room who are part of the STEPNet collaboration, and worked through other organisations after that. And a lot of that was schools focused. Obviously, schools are not the only option. We've heard about some amazing projects that are using different spaces. And it's thinking about, for what you want to achieve, is that the right audience in the right place? If you go into a school, children are, broadly speaking, expecting to learn. I'm not saying they're thrilled about it, but that is the mindset and the expectation that they are in that space with. The same children in a library on a weekend, or in an after-school club, or in the shopping centre, they're in a different space and a different way of thinking. And so depending on what you want to happen, what you want to change, If they're in school, they obviously don't have any of their family with them, or they might have their friends, depends on how the classes are set. Whereas if you want to engage the whole family and bring that kind of cultural change with you, you might want to explore those other spaces where it goes to and what that looks like. Who should be doing them? It might be that you've had a brilliant idea and you're very excited to deliver it, but just take a moment to think, should it be me? Am I the best person to be doing this and to be making this connection? Because as it's come up through the others, it's that part around the human connection and who's right. So there might be some situations where actually sending out one of the undergraduate students who's much closer in age, who's kind of a more aspirational role model. It might be something for the type of audience where actually sending someone out with quite a cool brand name helps drawing that audience and what you're going to be able to do with it. And so don't get swept along in the idea that you have to do it all yourself. Take that time to think for you and your capacity and for the strategy of doing it. There's also an issue of scale. You are one person and not all of you have enough time allocated to this for the amount of work you're doing. And so bear in mind what your capacity is and don't overload yourself, because if you do too much and you burn out, then you'll have lost your passion and your joy for it. And it's better to pace yourself, do the small things, do them well, and bring others with you where you can. So, as I say, this could just be for you and looking at your bit. If you are in that position in a department, this could be a process to go through to get a document, a shared document for your department or your institution, so that you all really understand what you all want to do and what you all want to achieve. It doesn't mean you all have to do the same activities. You can all approach it from a different way. But that piece around shared understanding means then potentially as a department, you can start to look at what impact you've had as a group. And that helps you make a better business case for money, for resources, for staffing, for people who want to get involved in what that looks like. And the last bit of it comes back to that success. How will you know it's worked? And so within a strategy, it's nice to give some indication of what is good and what is not good. And so what would it look like when it's gone well? And that will tie into the evaluation that we'll come on to a little bit later. And you just really want to have a clear sense in mind of what that looks like. So I've got some lovely case studies to show that this just isn't me pulling stuff out of my, anyway. So it's not a photo, but it semi-counts, I think, for your gen count. So University of Portsmouth was one of the early institutions, physics-wise, to bring in kind of a written strategy for their department and what they wanted to do. So this case study is an excerpt taken from our Taking a Strategic Approach to Outreach document. You can tell I'm very original in naming. I'm a big fan of does what it says on the tin as an approach. And so they started it in 2017 following the 2016 REF and the conversations that had come out of that about REF impact case studies. So that was why it was important to the department and to the university. And some of you will be in a position where you want to, well, you want to, and no one's that excited about wanting to put things in for REF 29, but have in the back of your mind that you might need to have something to put into REF 29 for the impact case studies, and how you can share that. And that sense, you've got a personal limited time and budget, but the departments do. We know that universities are financially anxious at the moment. And so we've seen budgets for outreach drop. Staffing is obviously under significant challenge. So actually, where as a department can you invest that time to put it on? It is about creating a document. And as you can see, in this case, keep it short so that people might read it in hope. And the idea really is that it should be a working document. What you don't want to do is invest loads of time and energy into a document that then gets put on a shelf. And 5 years later, someone goes, oh, actually, we have a strategy. Has anyone seen it? And then they find it in the dust-covered piles. You want to make it something that you can refer back to, that other people in your department can refer back to as something active. The biggest trick in university physics departments, which I realize isn't the environment for all of you, is trying to get everybody else with you on it. You will barely get much pushback, but active engagement in feedback and bringing other people with you is a bit of a challenge. And I can see some enthusiastic nodding around the room on this subject. What I would say is do what you can to bring the others with you. There is only so much that is within your grasp, and it is not worth the time and energy trying to bash down doors. You do need the head of department to have spent some time, book a meeting in with them, use their PA if they've got one so they can't avoid you. Whoever holds the budget strings for your department, whether that's within your department or school or faculty level, and if you've got central public engagements or widening participation type teams, good to have them on board as well. And if they're all engaged, plow ahead and bring the others with you later if you have to. If you hold up on everybody to be really enthusiastic, you are never going to get a strategy document over the line, would be broadly my feedback. So this is Portsmouth, which is Jen as reference. So if anyone wants to hear more about how the process has been, because you've been through another iteration since this, haven't you, Jen? Then do feel free to speak to her. I'll volunteer her. She hasn't got a sticker on her thing, I don't think, but we'll call it a yellow star for the purposes of this. There we go. So do talk to her about it. The next thing you might want to think about is who is leading outreach in your institution. 2 reasons. A, they might be able to help you. B, it might be you. And it's helpful to know that if it is. And so by leading, this is about who is driving strategy, who is securing budget, who is advocating and supporting more people to do it. So it's not about doing lots of delivery. It is often confused by people pointing people to some leadership roles as doing lots of activity. And so it is a little bit of a different skill set that people need to evolve into this role and what that looks like. So first of all, look for who they are. It might be you. You might be part of it. You would like to think that there might be some others. In an ideal situation, it doesn't rest on one person driving it through alone, but instead a community, particularly depending on the size of your organization. You know, if you're in a small team or department, it might be one person, but if it's a much bigger structure, then hopefully you would have more. What are the tasks that those leaders are going to be doing? And this ties into the strategy. So maybe what you want to do is give more opportunity for people to get involved. Maybe fundamentally the university would like to drive its NSS scores, and you've decided that your answer to their problem, tangentially related, is to have a lovely student ambassador program who can do lots of lovely outreach, because they'll have a great time and that will bump the scores up. And you've made a, robust case to your head of department that's only partly founded on lies. And so that is what you are pushing forward with. And so what you're looking for then in your tasks in your leadership team are about who can do the training, who can get people involved. It might be that your main task is to get some budget by whatever means necessary. And so that would be a different set of tasks. So between you as you solo or as a group of leadership, what are those tasks that need to be done? And make sure everybody who has a leadership role has a job description, even if it's a short one. So if you are the member of staff with a responsibility for outreach, hopefully they did a job description at the recruitment point. Not a given. You might want to check that it's a sensible job description and doesn't require massive revision and updating. If it's an academic role who's had some time allocated to do some leadership, often they're not given one. And what that means is, how do you really know what you're supposed to be doing, or really how that fits together very well? And so it's nice to write it out and make sure that that's really clear and everybody knows what their piece of the jigsaw is and how that jigsaw piece fits together. And then finally, and this will be limited within your purview potentially, ideally that people have the workload suitably allocated. So if you are not someone for whom outreach is your primary role and you have been given some work around it, wouldn't it be nice that they'd actually given you some time in the workload model to be able to do that? I mean, that also depends on the workload model being realistic and not that they've made it under the number of hours by halving how much they allocate for a lecture, which also doesn't help. And so thinking about how much time people have to do it. And if it's not, and if you don't have that time, drop the number of tasks. Focus in on those small key things that you can do in that time available to you, rather than trying to do all the big dream at once and then feeling overwhelmed by it because there's no workload time. Drawing on that idea of there being more than one leader, really, really valuable to create a community. And I think particularly what we've seen is people for whom they have an outreach role in a department, particularly if they're the only one, it can be very isolating and feel like you're on your own and you don't always have somebody to talk to when you go to it. And so seek out what that community is in your department, in your space. Who else is doing outreach? Who would like to talk about outreach and have a nice time, and think about how to bring them together. And that will really depend. If you've got quite a lot of people who are doing like bits here and there for fun and they really enjoy it, maybe it's a monthly coffee morning where you can all get together, potentially have a speaker, bring some cake, everybody loves cake, and chat about what you're doing to kind of keep those communication open so you know what else is happening in your department, rather than you go into a school, you do your workshop, and then someone says, oh yeah, your colleague did this thing the other day, and you're like, oh, did they? Just feels a bit awkward sometimes when you start yourself in that position. And so the more you can share around about what's happening, the better. It might be that for what you want to achieve, if you're in a department, you've got a strategy, you want to push forward, that actually having a formal outreach committee is a sensible thing to do. And where you could bring in people from central widening participation, from school, from other areas of what is needed. And then that might have a reporting line up into the head of department in some way. So that would be a committee potentially that, you know, could decide what to do with a budget for outreach, if there was one. That could work out what is being advocated up to the head of department. What messages do you want to push up the channel? I appreciate the 3 meeting rule. And I, in my personal life, run a subcommittee that never meets. And we only operate by Trello and WhatsApp because you don't need to spend all that time faffing around. Meetings are good, I think, as a community space. So it's not necessarily always about like coming out with a plan, but you need to know what your objectives are. If your objective is to come out with an activity plan for outreach that year, everybody needs to know that that is what you are trying to achieve out of the meeting. If it is a coffee and cake, have a good time, and the objective is that everybody learns a little bit more about what they're doing, that is a valid objective, but the people coming to the meeting need to know which version of it there is. Because if some people are coming to make a plan and some people are here just for the cake, then nobody is going to have the most productive meeting or community space that they would like to have. So our exemplar from this one is from Cardiff. So Cardiff have, the way the Welsh government funding works means they've ended up with actually quite a lot of physics outreach projects. They've got several members of staff on it. And there's other people based in Cardiff who run kind of adjacent work. They share a physical office space. And even with that, they found they still didn't have a great idea of what the bigger picture of what was going on in the different projects. And just being in that space didn't of itself mean that they knew kind of what was happening for the others. And so they started a monthly meeting, which they called Physics and Friends, and spend an hour a month specifically sitting down and creating that space for sharing where they looked at what was going on. And so now they're more aware of what that expertise, networks, opportunities. So if you're having a problem on one project, you know what that person on another project has done that you can draw in and share what that looks like. And it minimizes that duplication of effort and improves collaboration. So evaluating, as I said at the beginning, if you've got a plan and you know what you want to achieve, the natural question to be asking yourself is, did I do that? And we would encourage you to ask that question of yourself as you go through. I don't want to spoil any of Dom's thunder. So this is not going to be in any way, shape or form a useful guide to how you can evaluate your outreach. What this is just a little series of points around what it is, because a lot of people like to collect a little tick box form. And what you get, particularly if you've done it by paper collection back in ye olde days, is a large stack in the corner of your office of little paper forms, thinking, oh gosh, I really should type those out. Maybe I could get an intern. I don't have any money for an intern. Do you think a work experience kid would like to spend a week typing all these in? They don't, just in case anybody was wondering. That is not how year 10 work experience students like to spend a week. And so it's not about doing written evaluation for evaluation's sake. It's about thinking what you want to do. So firstly, and particularly if you have a coordinating role in your department, the very basic level, you might want to know what's happened. If you were hoping to collect some kind of department or institutional statistics, do you have a way of knowing what is happening across your department? And what you usually find, particularly if you're new in role and new in that space, is there's a bunch of people doing little projects that they haven't told you about, they haven't told anybody about, and it's very hard to start gathering that data. And it is a bit of a culture shift, and it does take a little bit of time to get going. And it depends what your system is as to what's the best thing. If you've created that community, that can really be a great space because you're starting to hear what's going on already. And then it might be that you've got an online portal where you can put a form, people doing the form, obviously a challenge. You might prefer to do a personal census by knocking on doors at a certain time of year of what people are doing. If you're an organization that's had enough budget for freebies, you can advertise the freebies, and the condition of them taking the freebies is that they tell you where they're going, who they're talking to, and what they're doing. And so exploring what that range is of finding out what is going on in your space and how you keep track of that on a basis. Because what you can do with that then is you can collect some lovely statistics that sound great because they've got big numbers, and, you know, senior leadership like big numbers. It's not about big numbers, but, you know, in how you manage those pieces. It might be that what you're doing is a new activity. You've thought up a new practical, maybe, that you're going to do at a festival, or you've got a new version of a talk. And actually what you want to know is, does this work? Is this something that is going down well, that is pitching the right moment, or does it break all the time? Has that child eaten that rock while I wasn't paying attention? You know, there's more details. Never underestimate what a child might try. They didn't eat the rock. They just asked if they could. Manners are lovely. But that's not likely to be a formal thing. That might be that you ask one of your colleagues to watch you do it and say, what did you think? If it is a school group, maybe you talk to the teacher afterwards. It might just be a case of your reflection. You know, you're experienced, you know what you're doing in this space. You look at your audience and you go, well, sleep in that back corner over there. Maybe I need to do an active bit at this stage to kind of get everybody moving and what it looks. But it's rarely for this doing a form and filling it in and what it looks like. The piece that I think most people try and go to too quickly is that summative evaluation. What effect has it had? And what I would say with this is really to be sensibly targeted among your activities based on something that you think will have had a measurable impact. If you have gone in and done one single workshop with a group that you are never going to see again, they will tell you they've had a lovely time. But as soon as you ask the qualitative feedback, it's all about the biscuits. And I very seriously considered doing a randomized control trial where I brought a bus of children in, let them run around for a bit, gave them some biscuits, put them back on the bus, and see if the forms came out the same way. I genuinely think that a lot of them would have done. A lot of it was, oh, I got to miss French. Great. Win for science, I guess. And so really think about where would you want to target your summative evaluation? Are the longer term projects that you're working on? Is there something where you can get more out of what you're doing with that relationship and what that looks like? This still does not need to be a form. It doesn't need to be a pre or post survey. It might still be conversations, or it might be things you do as part of the activity. And the more you can bed it into what you do, the easier it is with that audience, because as those with the more stronger physics background know, as we know from Schrodinger's cat, if you try and measure it, you have interfered with the system. And so the more you can build what you're looking to do into it, the easier it will be, A, to get the response rate. There's nothing more annoying than the survey you sent out and one teacher has answered it out of 20 again. And it's the same teacher, bless them, every time. And it's just really hard. And we know they're busy, and we know that the people you're asking to give you this feedback have got a lot on. So how can you make it as easy as possible for you to get the information that you need? And I'm not going to go into the full detail of working out what information you need, but if this has whetted your appetite with enthusiasm, Dom's workshop, I'm sure, will provide more thrilling stuff about it. The fourth type you might want to think about is quality assurance. So you've trained your student ambassadors, they've started going out doing workshops, and there's a little bit of you that's thinking, I think they were right on their own. Are they doing this the way that we would want them to? Do we feel like they're confident enough? Have they come across as well as they want? They need some feedback to help their development and help push them forward. And so this is one to think about, particularly if you are responsible for other people going out and delivering. How do you know what they're doing? And you won't need to do this for everybody. Once people reach a certain degree of experience, but it's nerve-wracking when you're going out and doing it for the first time. And so some of it's in what support you might have given them before, other options for them to do co-presenting before you kind of send them out with a kit to have a go on their own. But it might also be that you or somebody else could go and observe, have some coaching conversations with them, some helpful feedback about how they might improve and other things they might want to think about for the future. Very important when we say quality assurance, I think the commercial connotations are kind of the products that aren't good enough get swiped into the bin and never allowed to see the light of day. That's not what I mean by this. It's really about that continuous improvement and making it feel like a friendly, safe environment where people can do the practice that's needed to get more experience and to get better, but in a supportive way where they're getting that support, they're getting feedback and help to kind of push them through their development. The possibly final one, I've very much lost track of where I am in this, so it's all a mystery as to when we'll finish. It's about sharing your outreach. And this feels a little bit counterintuitive because if you're excited about communicating your physics and going out, why wouldn't you be excited about communicating what you've done in your outreach? But what I have found is that people are substantially less excited about going out and telling people what they've done in their outreach. And that's fine. You don't have to communicate everything. You know, like the research, if you don't communicate, you haven't finished your research. It's not true. If you don't communicate, you can still finish your outreach. But if you need people to advocate for you and you need money and you need other people to help you with your activities, then sharing and bragging about what you do is really important. If you are in a higher education institution, nobody else is going to toot your trumpet for you. It is very important to do your full lung warm-ups and toot it as loudly as you can and to get that word out there and spread what's going on. And it can be hard because if you're doing some of that, you're maybe doing a little bit less of the going out and doing the outreach that you love or helping somebody else. And so what I've seen generally is that people are putting less value on it, but it is a really important thing to do if you want to create a sustainable ecosystem. Now, maybe you don't. Maybe that's not your role. Maybe that's not how things sit for you, and that's absolutely fine. But if it is, what you're thinking about is who do you want to share your work with? And so this will depend a little bit on what you want to get out of the work. But if we assume, for an example, HEIs, and what you want is budget and your job continued, hypothetically. Who are those decision makers? Who sits in the chains above that will be making that decision? Is it your head of department? Is your head of department these days largely a puppet figurehead and all the decisions are made by your faculty business manager? Is it that if you get a certain vice chancellor on board, then vice chancellor, pro vice chancellor, dean, whichever, that actually they're quite influential and might be able to swing things for you? So dive, if you will, into the political world of a university or whatever institution you may be in and think about who is that person or multiple people who might make decisions. Ideally multiple, because one of the big challenges of HEI is the churn rate in those roles. Your average head of physics lasts 3 to 5 years, and in the last year of it, they are checking out. They've got the big advent calendar going, and they can tell you to the day how many days are left before their sabbatical starts. And so what you don't want to be reliant on is one really supportive school manager, and then that school manager changes, and suddenly everything's precarious again. And sometimes there's nothing you can do. Sometimes they change all the roles at once, and then you're back to square one, and it's very annoying. But fundamentally, the more advocates you can get in that chain, the more security that gives you to staff transition. And thinking about what it was, so obviously the example I gave was around budget and job security, which are two very major concerns, particularly for the outreach officers we work with who have those roles focused on outreach. But it might be other things. It might be just about sharing the joy. It might be that you want more people to get involved in what you're doing, and so you want to show them all the great things that they could get involved in. And those are slightly different angles on what you might want to be doing. And then think about it. If this isn't something you feel comfortable with, you know, if you think that actually, you know, your vice chancellor is easily swayed by lovely press coverage, and what they really care about in their heart of hearts is to get the university's name in as much press as possible in a good context. But you maybe don't know how to contact the local journalists and the press. So think about who else in your department or institution could help? Do you have a press team? Is there a wider comms team who can get this on the university social media for you and go out and make friends? Again, I strongly recommend cake. Cake is the answer to so many problems, including just those days when you're like, why is this all happening to me? Make it stop. Cake. Cake is the way. Or cheese, sidebar. And then what opportunities are there externally? So you've all come to this, and it's been fantastic to see so many presentations of your projects. There are other conferences available as well, other opportunities to share what you're doing and to get out there and get that external profile and recognition for what you're doing. Also awards. You had a lovely example of someone who got an award. You don't put yourself forward, you won't get it. So look at what's out there and don't be afraid to push yourself forward. It may not feel like a very comfortable place for you to be in, but if that recognition could be valuable, then try and find a way to help yourself for it or to find somebody who can help you. So this case study is from the University of Liverpool. So in the Department of Physics at Liverpool, and I should note that this was a few years ago now, and things have slightly changed. So the outreach officer there was part of the communications group for the physics department. So in the department, they had a group that was focused on comms and particularly on internal comms. And so they had people from the different research strands, from the student teams, etc., involved. And so the outreach officer put outreach news into the bulletin. So that was going out to everyone in the department on a regular basis. So the outreach was seen and centered and visible to everybody in the department. They were sharing promotional information materials and news updates. The way their department was structured, they have screens as you come into the bottom of the department that they could control. And so they had things on there. And so the advantage of a screen over like poster displays gives you a bit more flexibility. You can put in a lovely video of the lovely activity you did and everybody having a lovely time. And kind of those stories and that connection that you can get out of it. And that just raises the profile across your department. More people know about what's going on. And those who are interested and who might want to help know where to go and where to look and how to find that support. So, as I mentioned, we now run a support network for people whose role is predominantly outreach in physics departments, but there's a range of other stuff we have that's more broadly. So if you go on our website, these are 3 main documents that you might find useful. If you're thinking about strategic approaches, there is, as I said, the very similarly titled document, Taking a Strategic Approach to Outreach. Some of the case studies will look familiar in how you go through that. And it's kind of a toolkit, again, not with answers, but with questions and things you might want to think about and how it goes through. Capturing Impact is our toolkit around evaluation, focused on activities with young people and using a science capital kind of lens on that. So thinking not about kind of, are they better at physics, but what does it mean for their confidence, identity, skills, and things in that kind of space. And then there's a document, if you're interested in that leadership space and what that looks like, we've got a report from a few years ago on exploring leadership and governance for physics outreach. So broadly, we've obviously supported these roles that are predominantly outreach. There's been a little bit of an increase in academic roles that have a leadership. And so we were particularly looking at how those interacted together. But obviously in some you have one or the other or a combination. The other one that's not on our website is on the National Coordinating Centre for Public Engagement website. It's a lovely one that we published in September, which we co-funded with the Science and Technology Facilities Council. For those of you who are going to be involved in a REF submission, exciting times ahead as always. They've done a review for us on the physics case studies from REF 2021 with some lessons for what might be coming next in terms of how that looks like. So overall, I think the key message is that I would advocate thinking strategically, even if it's only for you and for what you're doing and what that looks like. Find your people, find the community and the people to work together with, and don't be afraid to reach out and draw on the networks, whether it's networks like this, networks like ours. We do have a mailing list. I remembered somewhat about 3 a.m. this morning that I meant to put the QR code on, haven't done that. But if you go to our website and go to university support, you can sign up for our mailing list there, which sends out opportunities and things like that. But it's a lovely community. Everybody wants to help. generally. And so please do reach out, share what you're doing. And if you need support and guidance, there's plenty of people who are happy to help you with how that moves forward. I think I've got enough time for 2.5 minutes of questions. I was going to say, can we have Claire, please?
Yeah.
There's no questions, so if there's any questions in the room or online. Despite what I said earlier, I am open to anybody who wants to go with a comment rather than a question. Any examples? Yeah, the good biscuits, particularly teachers, rather than with food. Question of what's the sabbatical? Well, yes, research times. It's how they bribe them into being heads of physics. They tell them they'll have a year to only do their research with no other responsibilities for a year, or 6 months these days. Sabbatical's going down.
Wasn't part of the deal about cash for outreach in universities, the tuition fees? Is that still there?
Theoretically, I'm glad you asked. So the rise to 9K came with the requirement that the additional funding above 6K, which was supposed to be the minimum, which naturally no one went to because no one believed their university was a minimum university, should be spent on widening participation, which is the point at which all the central outreach teams rebranded to widening participation. In many universities, much of that money is tied up by the central team, and it is varying degrees of difficult to access for department use. It is worth cultivating your central widening participation team. If you want that money, it will need to feed into what they're looking at. The trouble is that we've been through a bit of a kind of a sway in how it goes. So when it first started, a lot of it was about access, and they were interested in kind of more outreach materials. There was a change in the Office for Students from the transition, and they moved a lot more to student success, and they put more of the money into how, once they've got there, how you get them through a degree. The new iteration, which they've had the trial pilot run for, and then I think the next series of access and participation plans, is much more about tailoring for your environment. So they provide a dashboard with what the data looks like for your university, and you're supposed to use that to make a strategic plan around access and student success. But the balance of that might depend on where the need is in your institution, and what that looks like, and how willing they are to look at any of that departmentally rather than institutionally will vary.
This is another general comment. If you're trying to get things embedded into your university, vice chancellors change a lot. I had 3 file on just before meetings. But boards of governors,
because of your
meetings, a very
meetings,
long time is they keep rolling over. So if you can bypass your vice chancellor and go straight to the board of governors, you can quite often get in there and stay there for quite a long time.
there you go, top tips. Excellent. Well, thank you, everybody. Let's thank her again. Have a lovely strategic time.